It takes a moment for his last sentence to sink in, and the full weight of it hits me. There have been uprisings? I ask, both chilled and somewhat elated by the possibility. Not yet, but they'll follow if the course of things doesn't change, and uprisings have been known to lead to revolution. President Snow rubs a spot over his left eyebrow, the very spot where I myself get headaches. Do you have any idea what that would mean? How many people would die? What conditions those left would have to face? Whatever problems anyone may have with the capital, believe me when I say that if it released its grip on the districts for even a short time, the entire system would collapse. I'm taken aback by the directness and even the sincerity of this speech, as if his primary concern is the welfare of the citizens of Panem. Then nothing could be further from the truth. But I don't know how I dare say the next words, but I do. It must be very fragile, if a handful of berries can bring it down. There's a long pause while he examines me. Then he simply says, "It is fragile, but not in the way that you suppose." There's a knock at the door, and the capital man sticks his head in. "Her mother wants to know if you want tea." I would like tea," says the president. The door opens wider, and there stands my mother, holding a tray with a china tea set she brought to the scene when she married. "Set it here, please." He places his book on the corner of the desk and pats the center. My mother sets the tray on the desk. It holds a china teapot and cups, cream and sugar, and a plate of cookies. They are beautifully iced with soft-colored flowers, and the frosting work can only be pitas. What a welcome sight, you know? It's funny how often people forget that presidents need to eat too. President Snow says charmingly. Well, it seems to relax my mother a bit anyway. "Can I get you anything else? I can cook something more substantial if you're hungry," she offers. "No, this could not be more perfect. Thank you," he says, clearly dismissing her. My mother nods, shoots me a glance, and goes. President Snow pours tea for both of us and fills his with cream and sugar, then takes a long time stirring. And since he has had his say and is waiting for me to respond, "I didn't mean to start any uprisings," I tell him. "I believe you. It doesn't matter. Your stylist turned out to be prophetic in his wardrobe of choice. Katniss Everdeen, the girl who was on fire, you have provided a spark that, left unattended, may grow into an inferno that destroys Panem," he says. "Why don't you just kill me now?" I blurt out. "Publicly?" he asks. "That would only add fuel to the flames." "Arrange an accident, then," I say. "Who would buy it?" he asks. "Not you, if you were watching." "Then just tell me what you want me to do. I'll do it," I say. If only it were that simple. He picks up one of the floured cookies and examines it. "Lovely. Your mother made these?" Peta. And for the first time, I find I can't hold his gaze. I reach for my tea, but set it back down when I hear the cup rattling against the saucer. To cover, I quickly take a cookie. "Peta, how is the love of your life?" he asks. "Good," I say. "At what point did he realize the exact degree of your indifference?" he asks, dipping his cookie in his tea. "I'm not indifferent," I say. "But perhaps not as taken with the young man as you would have the country believe," he says. "Who says I'm not?" I say. "I do," says the president. "And I wouldn't be here if I were the only person who had doubts. How's the handsome cousin?" "I don't know, I don't—" My revulsion at this point of the conversation, at discussing my feelings for the two people I care about most with President Snow, chokes me off. "Speak, Miss Everdeen. Him I can easily kill off if we don't come to a happy resolution," he says. "You aren't doing him a favor by disappearing off into the woods with him each Sunday." If he knows this, what else does he know? And how does he know it? Many people could tell him that Gale and I spend our Sundays hunting. Don't we show up at the end of each one loaded down with game? Haven't we for years? The real question is what he thinks goes on in the woods beyond District 12. Surely they haven't been tracking us in there, or have they? Could we have been followed? That seems impossible, at least by a person. Cameras? They never crossed my mind until this point. The woods have always been our place of safety, our place beyond the reach of the capital, where we're free to say what we feel, be who we are, at least before the games. If I've been watched since, what have they seen? Two people hunting, saying treasonous things about the capital, yes, but not two people in love, which seems to be President Snow's implication. We're safe on that charge unless it only happened once. It was fast and unexpected, but it did happen. After Peeta and I got home from the games, it was several weeks before I saw Gale alone. First there were the obligatory celebrations, a banquet for the victors that only the most high-ranking people were invited to, a holiday for the whole district with free food and entertainers brought from the capital. Partial Day, the first of 12, in which food packages were delivered to every person in the district. That was my favorite. To see all those hungry kids in the scene running around, waving cans of applesauce, tins of meat, even candy. Back home, too big to carry, would be bags of grain, cans of oil. To know that once a month for a year, they would all receive another parcel. That was one of the few times I actually felt good about winning the game. So between the ceremonies and events, the reporters documenting my every move as I presided and thanked and kissed Peeta for the audience, I had no privacy at all. After a few weeks, things finally died down. The camera crews and reporters packed up and went home. Peeta and I assumed the cool relationship we've had ever since. My family settled into our house in the Victor's Village. The everyday life of District 12, workers to the mines, kids to school, resumed its usual pace. I waited until I thought the coast was really clear. Then one Sunday, without telling anyone, I got up hours before dawn and took off into the woods. The weather was still warm, even though I didn't need a jacket. I packed along a bag filled with special foods, cold chicken and cheese, and bakery bread and oranges. Down in my old house, I put on my hunting boots. As usual, the fence was not charged, and it was simple enough to slip into the woods and retrieve my bow and arrows. I went to our place, Gale's and mine, where we had shared breakfast the morning of the briefing that sent me into the games. I waited at least 2 hours. I'd begun to think that he'd give up on me in the weeks that had passed, or that he no longer cared about me, hated me even. And the idea of losing him forever, my best friend, the only person I've ever trusted with my secrets, was so painful I couldn't stand it. On top of everything else that had happened, I could feel my eyes tearing up, my throat starting to close the way it does when I get upset. Then I looked up, and there he was, 10 feet away, just watching me. Without even thinking, I jumped up and threw my arms around him, making some weird sound that combined laughing, choking, and crying. He was holding me so tightly that I couldn't see his face. It was a really long time before he let me go, and then he didn't have much choice, because I'd gotten this unbelievably loud case of hiccups and had to get a drink. We did what we always did that day, ate breakfast, hunted and fished and gathered, talked about people in town, but not about us. New life in the mines, my time in the arena, just about other things. By the time we were at the hole in the fence that's nearest the hob, I think I really believed that things could be the same, that we could go along as we always had. I'd given all the game to Gale to trade since we had so much food now. I told him I'd skip the hob, even though I was looking forward to going there, because my mother and sister didn't even know I'd gone hunting, and they'd be wondering where I was. Then suddenly, as I was suggesting I take over the daily snare run, he took my face in his hands and kissed me. I was completely unprepared. You would think that, after all the hours I'd spent with Gale, watching him talk and laugh and frown, that I would know all there was to know about his lips. But I hadn't imagined how warm they would feel pressed against my own, or how those hands, which could set the most intricate of snares, could as easily entrap me. I think I made some sort of noise in the back of my throat, and I vaguely remember my fingers, curled tightly closed, resting on his chest. Then he let go and said, I had to do that, at least once. and he was gone. Despite the fact that the sun was setting and my family would be worried, I sat by a tree next to the fence. I tried to decide how I felt about the kiss, if I had liked it or resented it, but all I really remembered was the pressure of Gale's lips and the scent of oranges that still lingered on his skin. It was pointless comparing it with the many kisses I'd exchanged with Peeta. I still hadn't figured it out if any of those counted. Finally, I went home. That week, I managed the snares and dropped off the meat with Hazel, but I didn't see Gale until Sunday. I had this whole speech worked out about how I didn't want a boyfriend and never planned on marrying, but I didn't end up using it. Gale acted as if the kiss had never happened. Maybe he was waiting for me to say something, or kiss him back. Instead, I just pretended it hadn't happened either. But it had. Gale had shattered some invisible barrier between us, and, with it, any hope I had of resuming our old, uncomplicated friendship. Whenever I pretended, I could never look at his lips in quite the same way. This all flashes through my mind in an instant, as President Snow's eyes bore into me on the heels of his threat to kill Gale. How stupid I've been to think the Capitol would just ignore me once I'd returned home. Maybe I didn't know the potential uprisings, but I knew they were angry with me. Instead of acting with the extreme caution the situation called for, what have I done? From the President's point of view, I've ignored Peeta and flaunted my preference for Gale's company before the whole district, and by doing so made it clear that I was, in fact, mocking the Capitol. Now I've endangered Gale and his family, and my family, and Peeta too, by my carelessness. Please don't hurt Gale, I whisper. He's just my friend. He's been my friend for years. That's all there is between us. Besides, everyone thinks we're cousins now. I'm only interested in how it affects your dynamic with Peeta, thereby affecting the mood in the districts, he says. It will be the same on the tour. I'll be in love with him just as I was, I say. Just as you are, corrects President Snow. Just as I am, I confirm. Only you'll have to do it even better if the uprisings are to be averted, he says. This tour will be your only chance to turn things around. I know, I will. I'll convince everyone in the districts that I wasn't defying the Capitol, that I was crazy with love, I say. President Snow rises and dabs his puffy lips with a napkin. Aim higher in case you fall short. What do you mean? How can I aim higher? I ask. Convince me, he says. He drops the napkins and retrieves his book. I don't watch him as he heads for the door, so I flinch when he whispers in my ear. By the way, I knew about the kiss. Then the door clicks shut behind him. Chapter 3. The smell of blood. It was on his breath. What does he do, I think? Drink it? I imagine him sipping it from a teacup, dipping a cookie into the stuff and pulling it out dripping red. Outside the window, a car comes to life, soft and quiet, like the purr of a cat, then fades away into the distance. It slips off as it arrived, unnoticed. The room seems to be spinning in slow, lopsided circles, and I wonder if I might black out. I lean forward and clutch the desk with one hand. The other still holds Peeta's beautiful cookie. I think it has a tiger lily on it, but now it's been reduced to crumbs in my fist. I didn't even know I was crushing it, but I guess I had to hold on to something while my world veered out of control. A visit from President Snow, districts on the verge of uprisings, a direct death threat to Gale with others to follow, everyone I love doomed. And who knows who else will pay for my actions, unless I turn things around on this tour, quiet the discontent and put the President's mind at rest. And how? By proving to the country beyond any shadow of a doubt that I love Peeta Millark. I can't do it, I think. I'm not that good. Peeta's the good one, the likable one. He can make people believe anything. I'm the one who shuts up and sits back and lets him do as much of the talking as possible. But it isn't Peeta who has to prove his devotion. It's me. I hear my mother's light, quick tread in the hall. She can't know, I think. Not about any of this. I reach my hands over the tray and quickly brush the bits of cookie from my palm and fingers. I take a shaky sip of my tea.